Hello, good morning. Another sunny day. No rain today, not this morning anyway. I'd like to talk about something that clearly seems to be used as I suppose, a bragging point by some groups in our Western community. It stems from an old expression, make hay while the sun shines. Exactly. You know, 20, 30 years ago, I can clearly recall both New Zealand and Australia pursuing a line of thought for the working people of Australia and New Zealand. I can't recall whether that happened in the UK, but certainly in Australia and New Zealand. There was a push to encourage people to invest in companies like AMP, which really was a long-term life insurance company that got involved in many other things. But at the start, the idea was to sell you a policy that you put aside, taken out automatically from your salary each week or each month to provide, in a sense, a nest egg for you. And it was your option. You could apply for the option of a lump sum when you retired, or you could maybe work on a principle of maybe for the next 10 years when you retire, you'll get X amount of money per month or per week as a salary from that policy. It was really basically claimed to be an affordable monthly payment. But as time went on, as always, the proof is in the writing, and that is that they would inevitably lower the rate of return without you realizing it. And you'd find yourself, because of inflation and because the premiums for those joining later on was much higher to attain the same level as what you had. For instance, 30 years ago, if you had a policy that was going to pay you $100,000, which would have been seen as, wow, that's a lot of money to retire on. I'm going to have a wonderful retirement. Nowadays, 100,000 is barely the earnings of a low-income worker for a whole year. And we know what level of lifestyle a person on the minimum wage would earn. So what the governments later on decided that they would have what they call a superannuation fund, where the government would automatically deduct a percentage of your salary. And from that, they would also promise you the rewards in your retirement. But those that maybe were seen as looking towards the future realized that as the population got older, more and more people were jumping on that bandwagon. And they would have to be putting aside, that's the government, more and more money to meet the cost of Social Security for those that couldn't put aside money for their old age. And that's how it was really sold. Unfortunately, for some Americans, unfortunately, like to suggest that because of their wise decisions to join funds such as that, and the fact that in America they're not necessarily linked to a means test. In other words, what I'm meaning is, in Australia, as an example, you can be entitled or expect to receive Social Security support in your old age as an old age pension, providing that you meet certain criteria. What you can't do is stash away those private funds over your work time period in the workforce and expect to what they would describe as double dip. In other words, you would not be able to put aside maybe 100,000 a year in additional savings so that when you retire you have $1 million+ and then also claim Social Security. Because Social Security, from where I saw it originally, in England, was designed for those less fortunate, less able, often maybe just socially outcast, to provide for at least the fundamentals of life's support. And it was designed the rich and the poor would all contribute through their taxes with the intention of providing for those less fortunate. Now we can sit here and think about how, well, they're losers, they deserve nothing. But in a fair society, we must be also fair in our views. And that is that whilst we look at the mess that the world is in around us now, with colossal amounts of money being used for adventures, I would always say, adventures into areas that really government shouldn't be involved in. The government should, yes, be putting money aside for the event of maybe a war and having to fund that war. But in history, the governments never have enough. And the rich always fund those wars. Why? Because they get massive returns. You only have to look at the wealthiest families in the world. They've all contributed to the cost of wars around the world. And you might say, well, congratulations on them. They've been very charitable. No, they haven't. They've done it for a reason, and that is that they have a guarantee that the government in the future will be able to pay their debts back to that family. And they've become astronomically rich. But I'm not talking about those because this is about attitudes. Attitudes by so many who feel that they're so gifted in having put aside their money. They suggest that they sacrifice a higher rate of pay in return for receiving a benefit when they retire. It's a funny way of looking at it, but what it just means is that congratulations to me for joining a fund, my decision, and as a result, I now have a bigger nest egg to rely on in my old age. It's nothing about being smart. It's nothing about being prepared to take a lower salary. It's not being prepared to take a lower. It was your decision to put aside money for your old age. And therefore, it was maybe considered as an astute financial move. That's all. But you were in a position maybe to do that, just like somebody who's earning $4,000 a week compared to the average person $1,000. Of course, you have more money to put it, but then of course you have to take into account that a person earning $4,000 has probably more costs to meet each week than a person on $1,000. We need all to remember that not everybody is rich in this world. Not everybody has the wherewithal to put aside money for their old age. And that's why Social Security is an essential item for those coming here to the Philippines. It's not the money you have stashed away in some fund that pays you a premium every week or every month. That situation is not the norm. It is the rare event. Somebody commented yesterday on a video I did that they've been 38 years working for the federal government. And also they were putting money aside in a thrift account, which is probably the same as what I'm talking about, a superannuation fund. And when he retires, he has retired. He will get in the range of $5,000 to $8,000 American for the next 10 years. Wow. Now there you are. There's a classic example. He has paid off his house. One assumes that it's probably worth many hundreds of thousands, if not a million plus. Therefore, congratulations to him. If the system allows that, that's great. But around the world, we have to remember also things are changing. And in New Zealand, there is a very brave member of parliament, just like a senator or a congressman, who is pushing a bill to her government with the idea of suggesting that they follow the lead of that of Australia and of England, and that is means testing Social Security, which, from my point of view, I do think is important that everybody realise what that means. Excuse the pun. It means that, as an example, in Australia, we'll pick $1 million. So the family home is worth $1 million. Okay, the government said that's fine, well done. That is exempt from your assets. In other words, it's not going to be taken into account when they do their figures. But also what it does say is that if you have $100,000 in the bank, they're saying to you now, whoa, hang on a minute, Mr. Who you are. You have 100,000, right? Well, I don't think you qualify for Social Security yet. You must spend that Social Security. You must get to the point where you've only got 20,000 in the bank. Then you can apply and more likely get Social Security support. Because that's what it's designed for. It's designed for people not falling through the net. In other words, people who need money to support themselves and their family. They need that money, and that's what Social Security is there for in most cases around the world. But sadly, it seems that in America, it's not means tested. Therefore, you can have a colossal amount of assets. You can have money tucked away in shares and dividends, and it doesn't affect you getting Social Security. Well, I really don't think that's the case. I think that in America, the same would apply. It might not be called a means test, but I would think that America is not that stupid to be paying somebody who's maybe retired from the government a salary that's equivalent, if not more, in the form of a pension of that of, say, England, Australia, or New Zealand per month. I would tend to think a lot of them, these statements from these people, are more like bravado. They're trying to infer the idea that they're the chosen ones that can now, after being very careful in their lives, very astute, they're now entitled to Social Security too. I don't think so. There are people who are military who will get military pensions. And again, if you had to live on a military pension as an enlisted person, I doubt very much that it's going to be enough to provide you with a wonderful lifestyle. And therefore, you may well be entitled to a top-up from some Social Security scheme. But we do need to remember that those that come to the Philippines reinvent themselves. They portray themselves as successful, the leaders of their country now decided to retire in the Philippines. And you don't have to look very far. There's an American joke that if you go to a bar anywhere in the Philippines, Cebu, Dumaguete, or Manila, or even Angeles, you'll find half a dozen retired SEALs, Navy SEALs. Amazing how they all come here. But it's just like you'll find Australian engineers and New Zealand engineers. Really? I think you'll find that that's the way they describe. They were chippies and sparkies and plumbers from the countries they came from. And because they can't explain that, there's no equivalent here. And just to say they were in construction would puzzle a Filipino, because to say you're in construction means you're earning maybe 700 pesos a day, manual work. And that's not what you're trying to portray. We all have our little wishes to put forward the best foot. So guys, when a guy says to you, or a person says to you, they're living on 500,000 pesos every month, take it with a pinch of salt. Because if you had between $5,000 and $8,000 a month to live on, even in America, I don't think you would choose to come to the Philippines just to find a pretty lady. After all, with that kind of money, you can surely go to the local caravan park and find a pretty girl who is prepared to come and live with you in America in your $1 million plus average home. My goodness, the world is certainly full of a lot of BS. And here in the Philippines, if you want to come and live, you have to have common sense. You wouldn't be telling everybody, first of all, that you're on 500,000 pesos a month. You make yourself a target, and one day you may end up losing your head in many ways. So that's my thought for this morning. No doubt a little bit of a hot potato, but we'll wait and see. You all have a great day, and don't forget those thumbs up. If you've watched it and you agree with it, or you don't, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It doesn't matter. A thumbs up, please. Bye now.